People who run Rock Tomb users love to bait, but if this opponent don't know, there are no baits on this channel. Does the opponent respect the damage? Welcome back to the channel, aka the home of Shadow Pokemon. Often I like to feature spicy Shadow Pokemon more for entertainment purposes, but every now and again I'll showcase a team you can actually climb with, and today is that day. This team has received no fewer than 7 buffs over the last 5 or 6 seasons, elevating all 3 of these Pokemon into meta monsters. I'll be honest, when I was streaming my battles with XehrFelrose the other day, I was seeing water types in the lead near enough every single game. I led Bellossom, but the issue is Bellossom wasn't particularly good into 2 of the most common water types, that would be Golisipod and Tentacruel. So instead of Bellossom, we're opting for Fortress. For the first time, I'm going to be trying out the Shadow Punch variant of Dusknoir, and I was able to go on a 10-game win streak. Without any further ado, let's get into the battle! And in game 1, I lead Shadow Forretress into Lapras, an absolutely beautiful lead for me. The opponent say switches into Drapion. Drapion was giving me all sorts of problems on yesterday's stream. However, we've got access to Earthquake, and you better believe I am full sending. There's 2 rules on the channel. You guarantee the shield or do massive damage. Earthquake sneaks through the Protect shield, and just like that, Drapion straight in and straight out. The opponent sends out Cobalion. I try my luck at a Sacred Sword catch. Not that the opponent was ever probably going to throw there, but you may as well bank some energy, and Dusknoir hits the field of play. I correctly shield at the Stone Edge. The opponent sends out Lapras into a loaded Dusknoir. We go straight for the first Dynamic Punch. Dynamic Punch forces the opponent's Protect shield. Dusknoir so incredibly spammy. All to the next Dynamic Punch, rocking Lapras below half health. Dusknoir reasonably bulky, mine's actually level 50.5. It is currently equipped as my best buddy. I could fire off the next Dynamic Punch, guaranteeing the final Protect shield or the knockout, but Lapras may as well get some screen time. We catch the Sparkling Aura, bait Cobalion back onto the battlefield. Lapras not actually too bad into this matchup. The sideways hit for neutral, and Sparkling Aura does a very solid chunk. The opponent heavily overfarmed, but they need to fire off a Stone Edge if they want to remove me from the field of play. The opponent go for the Sacred Sword. Lapras withstands the damage, reaches the next Sparkling Aura. The opponent going to put all their hopes and dreams on their own Lapras. Switch timers back up, back out comes Dusknoir. At this range, they're easily in Shadow Punch range. No real need to force in the Dynamic Punch. The first Shadow Punch forces the opponent's final Protect shield, and the second one is going to be all she wrote. GG's, and thanks for playing. Heading into the next battle, yet another water lead. I think one of the main reasons Fortress is so bloody good this season is every single team has minimum 1 water type, often 2, making fire types incredibly difficult to run. The opponent say switches into Guzzlord, somewhat of a problematic Pokemon for me. Despite me having an Ice type, we're running Psywave as a quick move, which would be double resisted. As long as I can remove this Guzzlord from the field of play, Tentacruel literally has nowhere to run and nowhere to hide against my team. We are triple strong into it. Again, we fire off 2 Volt switches and the next Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb goes unshielded. Double debuff, we should be able to tank the Brutal Swing. A Volt Switch farm down. I was tempted to catch this move, but I don't really want to switch lock myself unnecessarily. The opponent sends out Greninja. This could get quite tricky, to be honest. Greninja going to be reasonably good into both Lapras and Dusknoir. But we do debuff them, which is going to send out Lapras. The opponent pivots into Tentacruel, and Dusknoir hits the field of play. Dusknoir going to be taking resisted damage from the Poison Jab. Scald will do a reasonable chunk, but the opponent is never ever realistically going to be able to farm us down. I go for 1 Hex and the Shadow Punch, trying to throw at Discipline time in. I'll be honest, I'm sure a lot of you know I make content exclusively on my phone, and my phone has been overheating, which is probably one of the reasons I'm in so many gameplay issues. I could blame Niantic, but realistically it's probably just my processor overheating and me over-tapping and the game just not registering when I'm actually clicking. We managed to remove Tentacruel from the field of play, and it's now Greninja versus the world. Rather than concede a farm down, I send back out Lapras, and we really need to hope the opponent doesn't get a boost. You can see non-boost these Night Slashes don't do too much of anything. Speaking of over-tapping, I tried to throw 5 Psywaves and the Sparkling Aura and end up throwing on CMP. Thankfully the opponent didn't sneak an extra water streak in there, as that could have been catastrophic to my chance of winning this battle. The next time, washed up Jamie Finn over here, able to fire off the Sparkling Aura, decent fast move timing. It looks like the opponent looking for that fall, water streak and farm down, but Lapras refuses to die, reaches the next Sparkling Aura, which actually isn't lethal. However, we don't get 1 turn bring in, sneak the Hex. That Hex will be moving them from the field of play, and we just about get the job done. Heading into the next battle. We see Como-O in the lead position. I say switch into Dusknoir. You can see these Dragon Tails have already chunked me. I am going to invest a Protect Shield here. I don't often shield my save switch. Too often, however, as we've got that Ghost fighting coverage, I know nothing will be able to fully wall me. The opponent sends out Drapion, and I am going to guarantee a shield back here, or just straight up take switch. Dusknoir fires off the next Dynamic Punch, getting my Protect Shield back. The opponent overfarms very nicely, throwing the charge move just before I'm able to reach the Shadow Punch. Crunch removes me from the field of play. I'm going to attempt to full Volt Switch farm down. As long as the opponent doesn't get the defense drop here, we're going to be able to tank back-to-back crunches. The first one doesn't get the defense drop. The next one will get me low, but the Poison Stings are double resisted. After farming down this Drapion, I should leave with the Earthquake. So usually using a 4-turn move into a 3-turn move. You should throw 2 Volt Switches, then your charge move, but I'm so incredibly low, I'm just going to fire off the Earthquake and look to save Fortress as a potential 3rd shield. Out comes Galarian Weezing. This is a positive matchup for Lapras, however we do have to be mindful that Como-O could potentially reach a charge move, so if I burn the final Protect Shield here, I will need to catch to win this battle. The opponent fire off the Sludge. The next Sludge won't be lethal, but will potentially put me into Dragon Tail farm down range. The opponent invests their final Protect Shield, and I am going to look to match. Switch timers are now up. So both me and my opponent could pivot out. We actually end up doing that. It's a simul swap. The opponent had the Dragon Claw. I've got no idea why they didn't throw Lapras. Gonna fire off the Sparkling Aura, which is resisted, removes them from the field of play. And Lapras Bulk is about to be put to the test. Sludge doesn't get the job done. Lapras survives on 1 HP and a Dream. And we take a very close game. GG's to that opponent. Heading into the next battle, we see Lapras in the lead. The opponent save switch into Cobalion, and Dusknoir hits the field of play. This Dynamic Punch, despite not getting same type attack bonus, just does ridiculous damage, instantly rocking them into the red health. The opponent should return fire with the neutral Stone Edge, as the Sacred Sword would be double resisted. That Stone Edge actually did around half my health. I'm just going to fire off the Shadow Punch and look to remove Cobalion from the field of play, and we do exactly that. To my surprise, Lapras re-enters the arena. I feel like Dusknoir still has some play here, so I'm going to shield the Sparkling Aura. The opponent then attempts to catch on Giratina. I see it coming in, hold my energy, fire off the Shadow Punch. The opponent thinks they caught a Dynamic Punch, or perhaps they're willing to tank the damage, and Lapras hits the field of play. On Ice Shard, this was a very dominant matchup. On Psywave, it's not as dominant, but still pretty good. You can see these 1-turn Psywaves that do really chunk over time. It looks like the opponent also doesn't have Ancient Power. If they did, they'd probably throw it, as there's no real reason not to fish for a boost. The opponent still with 2 shields. Once again, I full send the Ice Beam. I've got no idea what the opponent is saving these shields for. It's all down to their Lapras to 1v3. We've got 2 Pokemon that can hit them for super effective. We pivot out into Fortress, fire off the Rock Tomb. I was really anticipating the opponent not shielding this, but it looks like they're playing it out to the very bitter end. Lapras already below half health and now debuffed. I hate to say it, but I guess the opponent's win con at this point is me lagging out, which is probably quite possible. My phone overheating, which is probably happening while I'm playing, or me having a heart attack. Thankfully, I'm alive and well. The opponent finally give it up, tank the next Rock Tomb, and we take that game. In the next battle, we see Drapion in the lead. The opponent says no thank you, save switch into Virizion, and I send out Dusknoir. You can see here we can clearly tank 2 Leaf Blades, which is very good information to know, as the double kicks are double resisted and essentially doing like 1 damage apiece. Because the opponent's applying so little fast move pressure, I know I can tank this next Leaf Blade and make the opponent make the first shielding decision of the game. Dynamic Punch, despite not getting same type attack bonus, is better DPE and hits harder overall. Dynamic Punch picks up the knockout, out comes Golisipod. I could have actually got the Shadow Punch off there, but I shouldn't have, as they got 1-turn bring in. I was actually anticipating Drapion. I'm not paying much attention, but I can't complain. If I got the Shadow Punch off, that wasn't how the game's intended to work. I just send out Lapras. Lapras going to do a pretty good job of operating as the damage sponge. Sparkling Aura goes unshielded. All we need to do really is get chip damage off on this thing, as Fortress will be able to close the show. You can see just how bulky Lapras is. Mine is technically level 41. It was made before XL Pokemon were a thing. I used to have it best buddied back then to boost it to level 41, which was the maximum level. The opponent invested a Protect Shield. I aggressively pivot into Fortress, tries to get ahead in energy, and Drapion re-enters the arena. We find ourselves in the 1-to-1 shield. Most people on Rock Tomb love to debuff, but we are full sending. Does the opponent respect the damage? Yet another Drapion gets one shot, and that is going to be game over. GG to that opponent. In the next battle, we found ourselves a water type that we certainly don't want to see. A Swampert is a water and ground type, meaning my Volt Switches are single resisted. I pivot into Dusknoir, shield up the Hydro Cannon, and out comes Cradilly. Why would you send out Cradilly into a loaded Dusknoir? The opponent shields the first Dynamic Punch. We're able to outpace the Dynamic Punch number 2. The second one goes unshielded, rocking them into the yellow health range. The opponent, of course, going to fire off a Rock Tomb. Grass Knot would do more, but who doesn't love a little cheeky debuff? As I'm debuffed, I don't know if Shadow Punch knocks out. I'm taking no chances. Fire off the Dynamic Punch, removing them from the field of play. Back out comes Swampert. I think I'm only reaching one move, so I'm going to fire off the Dynamic Punch. Even debuffed, it does force the final protection. We're going to send out Lapras to do what Lapras does best and absorb energy. Let's see if they're on Earthquake or Sludge. Hopefully Sludge, as Earthquake will hurt. Earthquake rocks me. Below half health, the opponent makes a very nice catch, catching the Sparkling Aura onto Tentacruel. So here all I've got to do is rebank the Sparkling Aura, save my final Protect Shield, and this game's already signed, sealed and delivered. The reason I've got to save the final Protect Shield, of course, Swampert will easily win CMP against Lapras. You can see this move comes nowhere near knocking out. I'm just going to pause, ensure Tentacruel still on the screen before firing off the Earthquake, removing them from the field of play. Potentially we might even reach an Earthquake and Lapras won't be needed, but Swampert does get that Mud Shot farm down, of course, leaving with the charge move. We're just going to shield this up. Shadow on Shadow Crime, that's easily Sparkling Aura range, and we are going to take that game. GG's to that opponent. Heading into the next battle, yet another Lapras lead. I understand it, to be honest, of course. I'm using Lapras as well. I just think it's probably the best Pokemon in the meta currently. But it's nice when you keep catching them in the lead when you're running Fortress. The opponent going to stay in, fire off the Sparkling Aura. There's no reason for the opponent to stay in this matchup unless they've got something else that doesn't want to see Fortress. So I'm going to fire off this Rock Tomb and attempt a Sparkling Aura catch onto my own Lapras. The catch attempt unsuccessful, and out comes Grumpig. I think this matchup shows you all exactly why I think Grumpig is just a terrible pick. My Psywave's non-stab and resisted. Their Psywave's hitting for neutral with stab. They've got access to a super effective move. In the Zero Shield matchup, we're still winning. Grumpig, sorry buddy, you're still spiced. You just aren't that Pokemon. The opponent not even able to Psywave farm me down. This is what I was complaining about the other day. It seems like such an awkward Pokemon where you force dump energy at low health mon. I send out Dusknoir looking for the farm down. The opponent not wanting to get farm down, save Grumpig and send out Galarian Weezing. I attempt to catch unsuccessfully. I'm going to fire off one Hex and the Shadow Punch. Rather than risking getting hit with a Brutal Swing, we're just going to pivot out into Fortress. Fortress going to easily tank this Brutal Swing. I'm going to fire off the Rock Tomb immediately and see what the opponent wants to do. If Rock Tomb forces the final protection, the opponent's still going to have to throw on Fortress. They are never ever fair in farming me down. The opponent actually bank a Brutal Swing, send out Lapras. Unfortunately, we just miss out on the charge move. I'm guessing Brutal Swing now, it isn't debuffed. It's probably the hardest move left in the game, or potentially a Shadow Ball from Grumpig. Let's see what comes in. Whatever comes in is going to be switched off, so I just need to manage my energy well. I see Weezing's coming in, so I'm more than happy to take my free Hex. I'm then going to fire off one Hex and the Shadow Punch. As long as the next Hex knocks them out, we're going to leave with a Shadow Punch. We will be winning CMP tie against that Grumpig, and once again, I'm going to tell you all, Grumpig isn't that Pokemon, and Dusknoir is going to emerge victorious. GG's, and thanks for playing. In the next battle, we see Primeape in the lead. One of my favourite Pokemon and a terrifying Pokemon to face off against. Of course, Rage Fist won't do a lot of damage, but neutral close combat, even from a non-shadow, yeah, ouch. Despite the opponent lowering their own defence, I full send the Earthquake, looking to remove him from the field of play, and the opponent catches on Steelix. That is more than fine for me, and I send out Dusknoir. Of course, we're inevitably about to get debuffed, which is super annoying. I'm not really too familiar with Dusknoir's bulk. So when I play this matchup, I was thinking, how much can I overfarm to keep myself out of Rage Fist range? With a -1 defense, I'm fairly confident I survived this move, but as the opponent threw an alignment, I'm thinking, if I just invest one protection, I can force both off this Primeape, and that's probably the best case scenario for me. If I would have died to that Rage Fist, I'd really struggle to get rid of this Primeape, so I think, in hindsight, this probably is the correct play. Primeape is going to leave double boosted. Most importantly, we've stripped both shields off him and got him into a range where we could just Psywave farm him down. I really like the position I'm in. I've got Lapras upper protect shield and a potential sack swap. The opponent does me a huge favour. I attempt to catch unsuccessfully. The opponent sends out Lapras. Lapras going to get debuffed with the Rock Tomb. And we find ourselves in a very similar position to what we had the other game where Swampert was in the back. So all I've got to do is farm up to the double moves and ensure I save that shield. We know Primate's got to move and we know we're going to lose CMP. The opponent firing off Sparkling Aura after Sparkling Aura, and quite frankly my Lapras doesn't give a shit. My Lapras now at the double, you know the drill. One will be moving Lapras from the field of play and one will be moving Primate from the field of play. But I'm going to have to burn the final Protect Shield first. The opponent fire off the Rage Fist bait, but that bait will not save Primate's fate as Lapras is going to clean up and the win streak continues. GG's. Heading into the next battle, we found ourselves the forgotten former meta kingpin, the basic bitch tin can Registeel. Any one move is survivable. The opponent likely going to fire off the Zap Cannon, fishing for that defense drop. The opponent sends out Lapras, and it looks like I was already spamming the Earthquake. Of course, Earthquake still going to do a solid chunk here. I'm more than happy to invest the Protect Shield. This is a very questionable counter swap from my opponent. We're going to shield the Sparkling Aura. I'm then going to overfarm, fire off the Rock Tomb, and I'm anticipating this going unshielded. If the opponent does shield, I'm just going to enter the mirror and look for the Sideway farm down. Of course, Lapras doesn't have a fantastic matchup into Registeel. With an energy lead, Sparkling Aura, a pretty decent move from the Shadow, and going to do a very solid chunk. The opponent not wanting to concede a farm down, send out Registeel. We've already got the first Sparkling Aura locked and loaded. You can see the second won't be lethal, but will put them very, very low. And the opponent actually look like play to the CMP tile. They do not win. Lapras doesn't win too many CMP tiles, but Registeel is one we can actually win. Lapras has done its job, and there's a nice opportunity to send out Dusknoir and look to start loading up energy. I'm going to overfarm, fire off the Shadow Punch before the opponent reaches a charge move. Shadow Punch from this range will move Registeel from the field of play, and out comes Golisipod. By no means a fantastic matchup, we do have an energy lead. We're going to fire off the first Shadow Punch, which doesn't do too much, but all chip damage is welcome. We're then going to farm up, able to make the catch. Even if the opponent fully undercharged this, it should still knock out. Back out comes Dusknoir. I look to fire off one on the move, and it looks like it's actually CMP. That'd be because I got one turn bring in. I really wish I would have just took the extra. I would have got a full free hex there. Shadow Punch forced the final protection. I look to fire off one and the move, and again we overtap. I'm getting so pissed off with this game. But that shouldn't save my opponent's fate. We're still going to be able to outpace to the next Shadow Punch, and that looks like Shadow Punch range to me. Dusknoir agrees, and we take that game. Heading into the next battle. Oh, hello Squidward. Nice to see you nice. The opponent opting to stay in a truly atrocious matchup. My Volt Switch is hitting for super effective. Their poison jabs are double resisted. So as the opponent's staying in, they're clearly got something else that doesn't want to see. My giant metal ball. We full send the Earthquake. Get that silly squid off my screen. I'd love to save my Fortress, but as they've sent out Virizion, I think I'm just going to opt to let this thing go down. I send out Dusknoir into Virizion, which is a great matchup, and hope Lapras is good against what's in the back. The opponent hasn't overfarmed much either. However, it looks like they undercharged that Sacred Sword. They do get one further double kick. We already know that we do survive 2 Leaf Blades. The opponent sends out Jellicent. I instantly pivot out into Lapras. Of course, Lapras, not particularly good here, but good enough. All we need to do is get chip damage on this Jellicent and let Dusknoir close the show. Psywave on Lapras is just such a ridiculous concept to me, because this should be an awful matchup. You can see we've already got this Jellicent into the yellow health range. My opponent makes a huge mistake going for the Surf Bait when I had no intentions whatsoever of shielding this Lapras. Lapras fires off one further Sparkling Aura. We pivot into Dusknoir, baiting back out the Virizion. Both me and my opponent are hanging on to 2 shields, and I guess it's time to start using one. The Hexes and even the Rock Tomb are put in a range where we don't even need to full send a Dynamic Punch, as 2 Shadow Punches will be enough to get the job done. We're able to reach the next one on the CMP tile. The opponent shields, and we're going to play the fun little game of you shield, I shield. Of course, you can clearly see I win CMP as that move was thrown on a CMP tile, so I could throw 3 in the move. However, as the opponent surf baited Lapras earlier, Lapras still around and will be absorbing this Leaf Blade, and that should be game over. I can once again farm up, throw the Shadow Punch on the CMP tie. The opponent still with 1 shield. They opt to burn it here. Of course, I am going to match. I'm just looking top right. If I see Jellicent enter the arena, I'm going to instantly tap my Shadow Punch, removing them from the field of play. The opponent's going to be 3 double kicks off their next move. We're only 2 hexes off the next Shadow Punch, but they don't even survive 2 hexes, and we take that game. Heading into the next battle, we said fire types were a myth and we see Shadow Typhlosion. We're going to pivot into Dusknoir and you're going to see the opponent go straight for a Thunder Punch. Clearly wanted me to no shield. I am going to oblige and not shield him. And in hindsight, I'm very glad I didn't, as out comes Golisipod. So if I would have shielded, I probably would have lost switch anyway. However, we are going to fire off back-to-back Shadow Punches and hopefully put this in a range where we can Volt Switch farm down. Although we're double weak to fire, of course, we've got two moves that in turn hit fire types back for super effective. If anything, I've probably done too much damage to this Golisipod, as we're not going to leave anywhere near a charge move. So instead of taking a double super effective Incinerate, we're just going to pivot into Lapras. My opponent opt to stay in, and this is a good sign. We're going to take the initiative, fire off the Sparkling Aura, forcing the first Protect Shield of the game. I've also got a comment, why the hell did the opponent XehrFelrose, a bug and steel type? I have no words. Able to reach the next Sparkling Aura. This should be forcing the opponent's final Protect Shield, and it does. The opponent looking to farm up to the double, but at this point I know my switch timer's up, so I can shield this, catch the next one, and sneak a Volt Switch. Game. Not sneaking that Volt Switch is actually going to be ridiculous for me, because you're going to see I'm going to leave insanely low. If we had more health, which we would have done if we would have snuck the Volt Switch, we would have took one less Incinerate, I think I win this game. However, it's not meant to be, and this one is going to end in a heartbreaking defeat. It feels bad when a win streak comes to an end like that, but in fairness, when you see Shadow Typhlosion, you're probably supposed to lose, although it would have definitely been a win if the game would have worked as intended. In the next battle, we see Drapion in the lead. Of course, you know the drill. I'm going to look to Earthquake, nuke the opponent through two Protect Shields. My opponent make a Savage catch, catching the Earthquake onto Virizion. Very, very nicely done. Is Jamie Finn tilted after that last battle? Yes, he is. I'll be honest, I do have a tendency to go off the rails when I lose a battle that I think I had no right in losing. Let's hope we don't start playing it like a potato and then end up losing like 5 on the bounce. We've seen Dusknoir into Virizion a few times today. 2 Leaf Blades are survivable. We win CMP. So again, we're going to farm up, throw the Shadow Punch on the CMP tie, leaving minimal farm. Whatever should come out, and with residual energy, Shadow Punch goes unshielded. The opponent sends out Drapion. I'm not actually sure I win this CMP time. I do fire off Dynamic Punch straight away. The opponent then snipes with Gator. However, our Fortress is still insanely healthy and going to be a huge problem for my opponent. Of course, I'm shielding this charge move. I'm going to shield the Hydro Cannon, throw one further Volt Switch and the Rock Tomb. I'm then going to throw one and make the pivot into Lapras and do what Lapras does best, look to absorb energy. Even if the opponent's got Crunch, I really don't care. Their debuff, this energy is not going to go very far whatsoever. That Hydro Cannon doesn't do much of anything. The opponent combos back into Drapion. Casually checking messages because why not? This battle's over. Not that I'm getting ahead of myself, but there really is very few win cons left for my opponent. They're putting all their hopes and dreams on Gator. They recognise there's nothing they can do and they concede the match. In the next battle, we see Golisipod in the lead. The opponent opts to stay in. I guess I may as well shield the first move, as it will do the most damage, because of course I'm going to look to fire off the ever annoying debuff. I noticed this a lot when I was on XehrFelrose's stream. We're seeing Golisipod in the lead with another water type in the back, so they are ABA weak to Fortress, and as the opponent's shielding an awful matchup, clearly this opponent is ABA weak. My opponent makes a very nice Rock Tomb catch onto Cobalion, but this works out fine for me. They're now debuff, meaning 2 Stone Edges won't get the job done. Despite Lapras being greatly improved into Cobalion with access to neutral Psywave as opposed to clunky ass Ice Shard, of course, we don't really want to see this thing on our Lapras if at all possible. We fire off the Dynamic Punch, removing them from the field of play, and we've got residual energy good to go. The opponent sends out Golisipod, which they do. We're going to fire off 1 Hex and the Shadow Punch, and we have so much energy. The first one removes them from the field of play. Out comes Drifblim. We're at the double Shadow Punch. One of these should force a shield. The first one goes shielded. Dusknoir already at the next one. I am so sorry, Mr. Opponent. You are absolutely getting cooked here. We send out Fortress. The opponent's going to have Mystical Fire or full send a Shadow Ball. The opponent goes to the full send of the Shadow Ball. We send out Lapras. The opponent like, you've got me, and they concede the match. Heading into the next battle. I can't believe I went like 14 battles without seeing Zygarde. I knew it was coming, and here it is. A truly atrocious matchup for Fortress. Dusknoir On paper, it should be neutral, but the opponent far out bulk us and have access to super effective crunch, whereas we can only hit for neutral. The opponent makes a catch onto Corviknight. Corviknight very bulky, but Dusknoir tanking these sand attacks reasonably well. Corviknight is such a fraud, man. This thing does literally no fast move pressure. I fire off the Dynamic Punch. Dynamic Punch does more, but unfortunately not quite enough to flip switch. I was tempted to shield here, and I think in hindsight I probably should have. I think I got a Hex farm down, although I wasn't entirely sure, so I play it safe and said send out Fortress. The opponent sends back out Zygarde. Oh man, switch advantage would have been everything in this game. We've already seen Lapras into Jellicent, isn't too bad, so we're still going to play it out and hope we can find some sort of win con. I'm going to call the opponent isn't going to bait such a bulky Pokemon. Shielding up the Shadow Ball is a good start. The opponent once again farm up to the Shadow Ball, which I will be respecting. Okay, again we shield up the Shadow Ball. Things that are starting to go our way. I'm going to fire off the Sparkling Aura. It looks like the opponent more than content, saving all their shields for bulky Zygarde. I'm going to farm up, fire off the Sparkling Aura just before the next Shadow Ball, forcing the Protect Shield. This time we're able to catch, and as the game's intended, we do get our Volt Switch through. I think this is still winnable. We're going to full send the Earthquake, as the opponent very unlikely to shield, and Rock Tomb would do absolutely nothing. Earthquake does put them in a range, but potentially even the Psywave and Sparkling Aura combination will knock them out. The opponent fire off the Crunch, Fortress. Doesn't look like it'll reach the Earthquake, so we're going to fire off the Rock Tomb, getting any chip damage in. The next Dragon Tail does remove us from the field of play. The opponent looking to stall out their timer. Gonna fire off the Crunch. Back out comes Jellicent. Can we Psywave farm them down before they reach the move? Hello? I'm looking at that screen thinking, have they even got 1 HP? Absolutely gutting. A very close game. GG's to that opponent. Heading into the next battle, we see Clefable in the lead. It seems so many people at ABA weak to Fortress, as so many people opt to stay in quite atrocious matchups. The opponent here can only hit us for resisted damage. I'm always going to keep over farming, ensuring if the opponent look to pivot out at some stage, I've got residual energy good to go. Instead of firing off this Rock Tomb instantly, I'm more than happy to tank another move and then look to over farm once again. Potentially, very annoyingly debuff whatever comes out next. As they're debuffed, I highly doubt they shield this Rock Tomb. Fortress removes Clefable from the field of play, and the opponent sends out Blastoise. We're going to fire off the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb forced the Protect Shield. The opponent now debuffed, looking for that rollout farm down, but Fortress being an absolute pest, reaching one further Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb gets Blastoise into the yellow, and look how much work Fortress has put in. Holy cow. I send out Lapras. The opponent pivots out into Drapion, and this of course is where I'm happy to stay in, and I'm not going to send Dusknoir out into a Dark type. People always ask me, can you run the non-shadow variant of Pokemon? I'll be honest, this non-shadow Drapion hits like an absolute wet noodle. These crunches are just tickling Lapras. I think Drapion is objectively better as a shadow. We're going to overfarm, fire off the Sparkling Aura just before the next crunch is reached. The opponent saving both shields for Blastoise. Blastoise comes in, opts a dump energy, and this game looks over. Dusknoir, incredibly spammy. You're going to see that Hydro Cannon doesn't even do half our health, so potentially we could shield flex here. I'm hoping by no shield in the first move, it will incline my opponent to reach that top left. The opponent's still playing out. We're now at the double Shadow Punch, so one will force the shield and one will remove them from the field of play. The opponent recognise there's nothing they can do, tank the damage, and we take that game. So that is just about going to wrap things up for today's Shoutcast. If you've got access to these 3 Shadow Pokemon, my, have you got some meta monsters in the Open Ultra League. So if you're enjoying the content, smash that like button. If you're new, consider subscribing if you like your battles featured on my channel. Link to a battle submission form is down below, and a huge thank you to everyone for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.